I jolted awake at 4 in the morning to my phone ringing with that piercing tone that cuts through your deepest sleep. My hand fumbled across the nightstand, knocking over an empty coffee mug before finding my phone. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something compelled me to answer. A voice I hadn't heard in 5 years whispered through the speaker, sweet and familiar, like honey, mixed with heartbreak. "Sweetie, open the door, it's cold out here." My blood turned to ice in my veins. Mom died 5 years ago, in a car accident on a rainy October night. Heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I crept barefoot across the hardwood floor to my front door. Through the peephole, I saw her standing on my porch, wearing the same blue wool coat she had on the night she died. She looked directly at the peephole with those gentle brown eyes and whispered about the loose brick behind the furnace, where I used to hide my diary. I stumbled backward from the peephole like someone had shoved me, my chest tightening with each ragged breath. The voice had mentioned my secret childhood hiding place, the loose brick in the basement where I kept my diary after Dad left when I was 8 years old. Nobody knew about that spot except Mom, and she was supposed to be 6 feet under at Riverside Cemetery. My name is Ferdinand, and I work as an insurance fraud investigator in Portland, Oregon. I've spent the last 10 years of my life learning to spot deceptions, analyzing evidence, and separating truth from lies. Everything I believed about reality was crumbling around me as I stood in my living room at 4:15 in the morning, staring at my front door like it might explode. The knocking started again, soft but insistent. 3 gentle taps, then a pause, then 3 more. It was the same pattern Mom used when she'd come to wake me for school back when I was a kid living in our old house on Cherry Street. Before the divorce. Before Dad disappeared without explanation. Before everything fell apart. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and called my sister Diana in Sacramento. The phone rang 6 times before her groggy voice answered. "Ferry, do you have any idea what time it is? This better be an emergency." "Diana, I need you to stay calm and listen to me carefully. Mom is at my front door." Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. When Diana finally spoke, her voice carried that patronizing tone she'd perfected during her psychology graduate program. "Ferdinand, you've been under tremendous stress since the divorce from Jessica. Working those fraud cases, dealing with people lying to you every single day, it takes a psychological toll. You probably had a vivid dream," and she mentioned the brick hiding place behind the furnace in the basement. Diana's sharp intake of breath told me she remembered. We'd never talked about that place, not even after Mom's funeral. It was our childhood sanctuary where I'd hide when Dad's voice got too loud, when the arguing downstairs became unbearable. "Ferdinand, listen to me very carefully. Mom died 5 years ago. We buried her. We were both at the funeral. You gave the eulogy, remember? You talked about how she always made pancakes in the shape of animals when we were sick." The knocking stopped. Through the door, I heard rustling fabric like someone shifting weight from one foot to the other. Then Mom's voice, again clear as spring water. "Ferry, honey, I know this is confusing, but I need you to open the door. There are things you need to know about your father. About what really happened." I pressed my back against the wall phone, clutched to my ear. "Diana, are you hearing this?" "Hearing what, Ferdinand? There's nobody there." "You need to call Dr. Martinez. Remember the therapist Mom saw after Dad left? Maybe you should—" I ended the call and immediately dialed Marcus, my best friend who lived 2 blocks away on Pine Street. Marcus had been my anchor through the divorce, through Mom's death, through every crisis that had knocked me sideways over the years. "Dude, it's 4 in the morning. Someone better be dead or dying." "Marcus, I need you to come over right now. Don't ask questions, just come." "Are you hurt? Do I need to call 911? Just come, please." I hung up and checked my security cameras through the app on my phone. Every screen showed nothing but static white noise, where clear images should have been. The cameras had worked perfectly when I'd checked them before bed. 20 minutes later, Marcus's beat-up Honda Civic pulled into my driveway. I watched through the front window as he climbed out, his security guard uniform rumpled from sleep. Marcus worked the night shift at a downtown office building, so he was used to strange hours, but his expression showed concern as he approached my porch. I opened the door before he could knock. "Do you see anyone out here?" Marcus looked around the empty porch, then back at me with growing worry. "Ferdinand, man, you look terrible. What's going on?" "There was someone here, my mother. I know how that sounds, but..." "Fairy." We both froze. The voice came from somewhere behind Marcus, soft and loving, carrying that particular mix of authority and tenderness that only mothers possess. Marcus spun around, scanning the yard, the street, the shadows cast by the porch light. "Who said that, Ferdinand? Someone just called you Fairy." My knees nearly buckled with relief and terror combined. If Marcus heard it too, then I wasn't losing my mind. But if I wasn't losing my mind, that meant something impossible was happening on my front porch. "Tell him about the birthday gift in the attic." The voice continued, now seeming to come from right beside the porch swing. "Tell Marcus about what I left behind, the Christmas decorations." Marcus grabbed my arm, his fingers tight with urgency. "Ferdinand, I can hear a woman talking, but I can't see anyone. What birthday gift? What's she talking about?" I stared at my best friend, seeing my own fear reflected in his dark eyes. "I don't know. I haven't been in the attic since we cleaned out Mom's stuff after the funeral." "Mom, then maybe we better go check," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Because whoever this is, she knows things, and she wants us to find something." The voice spoke one more time before fading into the cool October air. "Hurry, Fairy, before they realize I've made contact." Marcus and I climbed the narrow wooden ladder to my attic, our flashlights cutting through air thick with dust and memories. I hadn't been up here since the weekend after Mom's funeral, when Diana and I had sorted through boxes of photographs, old clothes, and the accumulated treasures of a life cut short. The space smelled like cardboard and forgotten time. "What exactly are we looking for?" Marcus whispered, though I couldn't understand why we were whispering. The darkness seemed to demand quiet respect. "Birthday gift, behind the Christmas decorations, apparently." We moved carefully between stacked boxes and covered furniture, our flashlight beams dancing across labels written in Mom's careful handwriting. Christmas ornaments, Ferdinand's school projects, photo albums, 1985-2010. Each box represented a piece of our family history, now gathering dust in the space between my ceiling and the sky. Behind a tower of red and green storage containers, Marcus's light caught something that made us both stop breathing. A small wrapped package sat on a wooden shelf I'd never noticed before, covered in silver paper with a blue ribbon. My name was written across the gift tag in Mom's unmistakable script. "Ferdinand." Marcus breathed, "How long has that been there?" I reached for the package with hands that shook like autumn leaves. The paper crinkled under my fingers, and for a moment I was 8 years old again, sitting under our Christmas tree, while Mom watched with that expression of joy she wore whenever she gave gifts. Inside the wrapping was a wooden jewelry box and an envelope. I opened the envelope first, unfolding 3 pages of Mom's handwriting dated October the 15th, 5 years ago, the day before she died. "My dearest Fairy." The letter began, "If you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and the voice you heard was my way of making sure you found what you needed to know." Marcus leaned closer, reading over my shoulder as I continued. "For the past 6 months, I've been investigating what really happened to your father. The story we were told about him leaving us for another woman was a lie. Your father didn't abandon us, sweetheart. He was murdered." The word "murdered" seemed to echo in the cramped attic space. I had to read it 3 times before my brain would process its meaning. I hired a private investigator named Jake Sullivan to help me uncover the truth. What we discovered will change everything you thought you knew about our family. The man who killed your father has been watching you your entire life, making sure his secret stayed buried. His name is Glenn Morrison, and he used to be your father's business partner in Morrison and Wilson Construction. My father's name was Tom Wilson. Glenn Morrison had been his best friend, the man who'd spoken at Dad's memorial service about what a good man Tom had been, how much he'd loved his family, how tragic it was that depression had driven him to abandon us. The key in this box opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank on Burnside Street, box number 347. Inside, you'll find everything Jake and I discovered. But Ferdinand, I need you to know that Glenn Morrison is dangerous. If something happens to me before I can tell you this in person, it means he found out what we were doing. I looked at Marcus, whose expression had shifted from confusion to alarm. The address 1247 Maple Grove Lane belongs to Dr. Vincent Carver, a therapist who specializes in repressed memory therapy. Glenn Morrison has been sending people there for years, people who might remember things that could hurt him. I think your father remembered something important before he died. My mind raced back through childhood memories trying to understand what Mom was telling me. Glenn Morrison had been at every birthday party, every Christmas dinner, every important moment of my life after Dad's death. He'd been the one who'd helped Mom with insurance paperwork, who'd made sure we had enough money to keep the house, who'd paid for my college tuition when money got tight. There's more, Fairy, but I can't put it all in this letter. The safety deposit box will tell you everything. Just remember that your father loved you more than life itself, and everything he did was to protect our family. The letter was signed with her name and a small drawing of a heart, the same way she'd signed every note she'd ever put in my lunchbox. Marcus found his voice first. Ferdinand, this is insane. Glenn Morrison has been like an uncle to you. He's the one who got you your job at the insurance company. He's been at every family gathering since your dad died. Before I could respond, we heard footsteps on the wooden ladder. Both of our flashlights swung toward the attic entrance as Mrs. Patterson's gray head appeared through the opening. My 70-year-old neighbor climbed into the attic with surprising agility. Boys, I saw your lights up here and thought I should check on you. It's nearly 6 in the morning. Mrs. Patterson, how did you get into my house? She smiled with the kind of warmth that reminded me of fresh baked cookies and Sunday afternoons. Your mother gave me a spare key years ago, dear. We looked after each other, especially after Tom passed. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Something in Mrs. Patterson's tone suggested she knew more than she was saying. Mrs. Patterson, I said carefully, did you know my mother was investigating my father's death? Her expression grew serious, and she moved closer to where we sat with Mom's letter. Ferdinand, your mother was the bravest woman I ever knew. She spent months gathering evidence, asking questions that made dangerous people nervous. What kind of questions? Questions about why your father's business partner suddenly became so wealthy after Tom disappeared. Questions about why the police investigation was closed so quickly. Questions about why Glenn Morrison insisted on handling all your family's financial affairs. Mrs. Patterson sat down on a dusty trunk, her movements careful but determined. I saw your mother's car parked outside your house the week before she died, Ferdinand. She was watching, making sure you were safe. That's impossible, I said. I live across town from where Mom lived. Why would she be here? Because she knew Glenn Morrison had people watching you. She was trying to figure out how to tell you the truth without putting you in danger. Marcus leaned forward, his flashlight beam steady on Mrs. Patterson's face. Are you saying Ferdinand's mother was murdered? Mrs. Patterson's silence stretched between us, like a bridge we weren't sure we wanted to cross. Then the voice returned, floating through the attic air like music from another room. Check the brick, Fairy. Check the hiding place. All three of us heard it clearly this time. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Sarah, she whispered to the air, you found a way. Marcus and I looked at each other then, at the letter in my hands, then at the small brass key that had been in the jewelry box. The key to safety deposit box 347 at First National Bank. "There's something else you need to see," the voice continued, now seeming to come from directly beside me. "In the basement, behind the loose brick. I left something there the night before I died." Marcus stood up first, offering me his hand. "Come on, Ferdinand, let's go check your hiding place." Mrs. Patterson rose as well, brushing dust from her floral nightgown. "I'm coming with you, boys. It's time you learned the whole truth about your family." As we climbed down from the attic, I clutched Mom's letter and the brass key, feeling like I was carrying the weight of 24 years' worth of lies that were finally ready to crumble into truth. The next morning, Marcus and I stood outside First National Bank on Burnside Street as October rain drummed against the sidewalk. I'd barely slept after discovering the contents of my childhood hiding place, a second key newspaper clippings about my father's disappearance, and handwritten notes in Mom's careful script questioning every detail of the official story. Inside the bank, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as we approached the customer service desk. Helen Wright, the branch manager, was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. When I explained why we were there, her expression shifted from professional courtesy to something deeper. "Your mother was a remarkable woman, Ferdinand," she said, leading us toward the vault area. "She came here every few weeks for the last 6 months of her life, always asking about the security of our safety deposit boxes, always worried about protecting something important. She used her master key along with the brass key from Mom's jewelry box to open safety deposit box 347. Inside was a manila envelope thick with documents that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. The first item was a business card for Jake Sullivan, private investigator, with a handwritten note, "Call him. He has the rest." I dialed the number on the card from the bank's customer phone. Jake Sullivan answered on the second ring with a voice that sounded like it had survived too many late nights and difficult conversations. "Ferdinand Wilson," he said before I could introduce myself. "I've been waiting 5 years for this call. Mr. Sullivan, I found your card in my mother's safety deposit box. Your mother hired me to investigate your father's disappearance. What she discovered got her killed." The words hit me like cold water. Marcus leaned closer to the phone as I switched it to speaker. "Mr. Sullivan, my mother died in a car accident." "No, son, she didn't. Your mother died because she was about to expose a murder that happened 24 years ago. Meet me at Riverside Diner on Powell Boulevard in 1 hour. Come alone, but bring your friend. Trust no one else." While we waited to meet Jake Sullivan, I spread the contents of the safety deposit box across a table in the bank's conference room. Helen Wright brought us coffee and sat with us as we went through the documents. The private investigator's reports painted a picture that made my stomach churn. My father's construction business had been more successful than I'd ever known. Tom Wilson and Glenn Morrison had secured several major city contracts worth millions of dollars. But according to financial records Jake had obtained, Glenn had been embezzling money for months before Dad's disappearance. "Your mother showed me these documents," Helen said quietly. "She was terrified but determined to get justice for your father." A medical examiner's report from 1999 raised questions about discrepancies in the original investigation. The police had declared my father missing after only 72 hours, despite having no evidence he'd left voluntarily. His car was found at Portland International Airport, but security cameras from that time period had mysteriously malfunctioned. Insurance papers showed that Glenn Morrison had collected on a life insurance policy worth $2 million after my father was declared legally dead 7 years later. Glenn was listed as the beneficiary due to their business partnership agreement. "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to a surveillance photo dated 3 weeks before Mom's death. The image showed Glenn Morrison's black Mercedes parked outside Mom's house on Hawthorne Street. Jake was watching Glenn watch your mother. Another photo showed 2 men in dark suits following Mom's silver Honda Civic through downtown Portland. Jake had written notes on the back, "Glenn's associates, professional surveillance, Sarah is in danger. The final document in the envelope was a copy of a police report from the night Mom died. The official story said she'd lost control of her car on a rainy curve near Mount Tabor. But Jake's handwritten notes in the margins told a different story. Brake lines cut professionally. Accident staged. Sarah Wilson was murdered on October 16th at approximately 11:30 p.m. I stared at the words until they blurred. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt it. "There's something else," Helen said softly. She pulled a small digital recorder from her purse. "Your mother left this with me for safekeeping. She said if anything happened to her, I should give it to you when you came for the box." I pressed play with trembling fingers. Mom's voice filled the conference room clear and strong and alive. "Ferry, if you're listening to this, then they found me before I could tell you everything in person. But I need you to know the truth about your father, about Glenn Morrison, and about our family." Her voice broke slightly before continuing. "Your father didn't leave us, sweetheart. He was murdered by Glenn Morrison on September 3rd, 1999. Glenn had been stealing money from their business, and your father discovered the embezzlement. When Tom threatened to go to the police, Glenn killed him." I gripped the edge of the table as Mom's voice continued. "But there's more, Ferry. Something I should have told you years ago, something that makes this whole situation even more complicated. Glenn Morrison isn't just your father's killer. He's your biological father." The room spun around me. Marcus caught my arm as I swayed in my chair. "I had an affair with Glenn 25 years ago before you were born. Tom found out when you were 8, right before he disappeared. Glenn killed Tom to keep the secret buried and to claim the insurance money. But he's been watching you your whole life, making sure his son was taken care of." The recording continued as I struggled to process what I was hearing. Glenn has been sending anonymous payments to Diana for years, money she thinks comes from an inheritance. He's been controlling our family's finances, making sure we never struggled too much, never asked too many questions. But he's also been making sure we never got too independent, never moved away, never escaped his influence. My mother's voice grew stronger as the recording neared its end. "I know this is devastating, Ferry, but you need to know who you really are and what Glenn Morrison is capable of. He's killed your father. He's manipulated our family for decades. And if he knows I've discovered the truth, he'll kill me too." The recording ended with the soft click of the stop button. Marcus, Helen, and I sat in complete silence as the weight of revelation settled around us like fog. Everything I'd believed about my identity, my family, my life had just collapsed into rubble. My biological father was the man who had murdered the only father I'd ever known. Jake Sullivan's voice came back to me through the silence. "Meet me at Riverside Diner. Trust no one else." I looked at the documents scattered across the table, at the evidence of decades of lies and manipulation, at proof that the man who'd been like an uncle to me was actually a killer. And I realized that the supernatural mystery of my mother's voice had led me to a very human truth that was far more terrifying than any ghost. Riverside Diner smelled like bacon grease and strong coffee, the kind of place where Portland's working class gathered before dawn to fuel up for another day. Jake Sullivan was exactly what I'd expected a private investigator to look like, 50-something years old, gray stubble eyes that had seen too much truth for one lifetime. He slid a manila folder across the red vinyl booth as Marcus and I sat down opposite him. "Your mother was one of the bravest people I ever worked with," Jake said without preamble. "She knew getting this evidence could get her killed, but she was determined to get justice for Tom." "Why didn't she go to the police?" Marcus asked. Jake's laugh was bitter as day-old coffee. "Because Glenn Morrison owns half the police force in this city. His construction company has built every major municipal building for the past 20 years. He's donated millions to political campaigns. The man has more influence than the mayor." I opened the folder Jake had given me. Inside were photographs that made my blood run cold. Glenn Morrison shaking hands with the police chief. Glenn at a charity fundraiser with the district attorney. Glenn cutting a ribbon at the opening of the new courthouse that his company had built. Your mother understood that official channels wouldn't work, Jake continued. So we decided to gather enough evidence to take the story to the media, make it too big for Glenn to cover up. What kind of evidence? Financial records showing the embezzlement? Testimony from construction workers who saw Glenn and Tom arguing the day before Tom disappeared. Soil samples from the construction site where we think Tom's body is buried. Jake pulled out a map of Portland with several locations marked in red ink. Glenn's company developed these properties in the months after your father disappeared. We think Tom's body is under the foundation of the apartment complex on Division Street. Marcus studied the map with the focused attention he'd learned from his security work. How sure are you? Ground-penetrating radar showed anomalies consistent with human remains, but we'd need a court order to excavate, and no judge in this city would sign one without ironclad evidence. What about the soil samples? Inconclusive. 24 years is a long time. But your mother had one more piece of evidence, something that would have been impossible for Glenn to explain away. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder, the same model Mom had used for her final message. 3 days before she died, your mother got Glenn Morrison to confess. I stared at the recorder like it might explode. She recorded him. Your mother was smarter than Glenn realized. She told him she'd discovered some inconsistencies in Tom's disappearance and asked Glenn to meet her for coffee to discuss them. She wore a wire. Jake pressed play. Glenn Morrison's voice filled the diner booth, confident and smooth as aged whiskey. Sarah, I've been expecting this conversation for years. Have you, Glenn? Then you know why I'm here. You want to know what really happened to Tom? I want to know why you killed my husband. Silence stretched across the recording before Glenn spoke again, his voice now careful and measured. Tom was going to destroy everything we'd built. He found out about the money I'd been moving around, and he threatened to go to the authorities. I couldn't let him ruin both our families. So you murdered him. I protected our children, Sarah. Your son, my son. Tom would have brought down the whole company, and then what Ferdinand would have grown up in poverty instead of having everything he needed. My hands clenched into fists as I listened to Glenn Morrison discuss my father's murder like a business transaction. Where is he buried, Glenn? Does it matter he's gone? But Ferdinand has thrived. Hasn't he good schools, college? Paid for a career with my insurance company? Tom's death wasn't meaningless if it gave his son a better life. Tom wasn't Ferdinand's father. Another pause, longer this time. No, he wasn't. But Tom loved that boy like his own, and Ferdinand never knew the difference. Sometimes the kindest lies are better than cruel truths. Ferdinand deserves to know who he really is. Ferdinand deserves to live his life without being destroyed by ancient history. Let the dead stay dead, Sarah. I can't do that, Glenn. I won't. Then you're making a mistake that's going to hurt a lot of people. The recording ended there. Jake tucked the device back into his jacket. Your mother left that meeting and drove straight to my office. We were supposed to take the recording to a journalist the next morning. She never made it home. I felt like someone had filled my chest with concrete. Everything I'd believed about Glenn Morrison, about my family, about my own identity was built on lies and murder. What happened to the original recording? Marcus asked. Gone. Glenn's people searched your mother's house after her death, took her computer, her files, anything that might have contained evidence. But Sarah was smart enough to make copies. Jake leaned forward, his expression intense. Ferdinand Glenn Morrison has been playing a long game for 24 years. He killed your father to hide his crimes and to claim you as his son. He's been controlling your life ever since, making sure you never got too curious about the past. But why not just disappear after killing Dad? because he loves you in his own twisted way. You're his biological son, his legacy. Glenn Morrison doesn't have any other children. In his mind, he rescued you from poverty and gave you opportunities you never would have had. I thought about all the times Glenn had been there for important moments in my life. High school graduation, college acceptance, my wedding to Jessica. He'd always been generous with advice, and financial support always seemed genuinely interested in my success and happiness. The man who killed your father has been pretending to be your benefactor for your entire adult life, Jake continued. But now that your mother's investigation has been discovered, Glenn knows his secret is out. That makes you dangerous to him. What do you mean? I mean, Glenn Morrison has spent 24 years building a life based on murder and lies. If the truth comes out, he loses everything: his business, his reputation, his freedom. He can't let that happen. Marcus voiced the question I was afraid to ask. So what does that mean for Ferdinand? Jake's expression was grim as winter rain. It means that now that Ferdinand knows the truth, Glenn Morrison has to decide whether his love for his biological son is stronger than his need for self-preservation. I looked at the evidence spread across the diner table, at the proof of decades of manipulation and murder, at the recording of Glenn Morrison casually discussing my father's death, and I realized I was going to have to confront the man who had shaped my entire life. The man who had killed the only father I'd ever known, the man whose blood ran through my veins, whether I wanted it to or not. I need to see him, I said. I need to hear him explain this to my face. Jake nodded grimly. I figured you'd say that. Just remember, Ferdinand Glenn Morrison has killed at least twice that we know of. Don't underestimate what he's capable of when he's cornered. But I was already standing up, already walking toward the door, already planning what I was going to say to my biological father when I looked him in the eyes and demanded the truth about my family's destruction. Glenn Morrison's office occupied the top floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland, 30 stories above the city he'd helped rebuild, with blood money and buried secrets. The elevator ride felt like ascending toward Judgment Day as I clutched Jake Sullivan's evidence folder against my chest. Glenn's secretary, a nervous woman named Patricia, tried to stop me from entering his office, but I walked past her protests and pushed open the heavy oak door. Glenn Morrison sat behind a mahogany desk, larger than some people's bedrooms. His silver hair perfectly styled his expensive suit, tailored to disguise the softening that comes with 63 years of living. When he saw me, Glenn's face lit up with the warm smile I'd known my entire life. For a moment, he looked exactly like the man who'd taught me to drive, who'd attended my high school baseball games, who'd walked me through my first apartment lease. Then I placed Jake's evidence folder on his desk, and Glenn's expression shifted to something I'd never seen before: fear mixed with resignation. Ferdinand, he said quietly, I've been expecting you. Have you, just like you expected, Mom? Glenn gestured toward the leather chairs in front of his desk. Sit down, son. We need to talk. Don't call me son. Tom Wilson was my father, not you. Tom Wilson was a good man who loved you like his own child. But biology is biology, Ferdinand. You're my blood whether we like it or not. I remained standing, my anger building like pressure in a steam kettle. You killed him. You killed the only real father I ever had. Glenn nodded slowly, as if we were discussing the weather. Yes, I did. And I've regretted it every day for 24 years. His casual admission hit me harder than any denial would have. I'd expected him to lie, to manipulate, to try to convince me the evidence was fabricated. Instead, Glenn Morrison looked me in the eyes and acknowledged his crime as calmly as ordering lunch. Why am I managed to ask? Because Tom was going to destroy everything. He'd discovered the financial arrangements I'd made to fund our expansion, and he was going to turn me into the authorities. Our company would have been ruined, our employees would have lost their jobs, and you would have grown up in poverty. So you murdered him to protect your construction business? I murdered him to protect you." Glenn's voice carried a note of conviction that made my skin crawl. "Tom's moral rigidity would have destroyed your future along with mine. I made sure you had everything you needed: education opportunities, financial security." I pulled out my phone and started recording just as Mom had done in that diner booth. "You're confessing to murder." "To you, yes. You deserve to know the truth about your family." Glenn's secretary, Patricia, knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. She looked agitated, her usual professional composure cracked with stress. "Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are federal agents in the lobby asking to see you." Glenn's expression didn't change, but I saw his hands tighten on the arms of his chair. "Tell them I'm in a meeting with my son and will be available shortly." Patricia looked confused. "Your son, sir?" "Ferdinand is my biological son, Patricia. I thought it was time he knew." She stared at me with new understanding, then back at Glenn. "Sir, should I call your attorney?" "That won't be necessary. Ferdinand and I are just having a family conversation." After Patricia left, Glenn stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Portland spread out below us like an architectural model, with Glenn's construction projects visible in every direction. "I built all of this for you," he said without turning around. "Every building, every deal, every success. It was all so you could inherit something worthy of your potential. I don't want anything you built on Dad's grave." Tom isn't buried in a grave, Ferdinand. He's part of the foundation of the Riverside Apartments on Division Street. He's supporting families, providing shelter, contributing to the community he loved. In a way, he's more useful now than he ever was alive. The casual cruelty of that statement made me want to put my fist through the window. Instead, I pulled out Mom's final recording and placed it on Glenn's desk. "Listen to this." Mom's voice filled the office, warm and alive and heartbreaking. But this wasn't the recording from the diner. This was something else, something I'd found hidden in a second safety deposit box that Mrs. Patterson had revealed that morning. "Ferry, if you're listening to this, then Agent Patricia Collins has confirmed what I suspected. Glenn Morrison isn't just a murderer. He's the center of a criminal organization that's been operating in Portland for decades." Glenn spun around from the window, his face pale. "Where did you get that?" "Mom made multiple copies. She was smarter than you thought." The recording continued. "The FBI has been investigating Glenn's money laundering operation for 3 years. His construction company is a front for washing drug money through legitimate city contracts. Your father wasn't just killed to hide embezzlement, Ferry. He was killed because he discovered Glenn was working with Mexican cartels." Glenn moved toward his desk, but I stepped between him and the recorder. "Agent Collins has been working undercover as Glenn's secretary for 18 months. Patricia isn't just nervous around the office, she's gathering evidence for a federal investigation. Glenn's empire is about to collapse, and he knows it." On cue, the office door opened and Patricia walked in, but now she was flanked by 2 men in FBI windbreakers. She pulled out a badge and service weapon. "Glenn Morrison, you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering." Glenn looked at Patricia with something like admiration. "How long have you known?" "About your criminal activities, 18 months. About Ferdinand being your son. I figured that out this morning when you introduced him that way." As the federal agents handcuffed Glenn, he looked directly at me. "Ferdinand, there's something else you need to know. Your mother isn't dead." The words hit me like lightning. "What did you say?" "Sarah Wilson is alive. The FBI faked her death to protect her while they built their case against me. She's been living in witness protection for 5 years. Agent Collins, who I now realized was the real Patricia, nodded confirmation. "Your mother has been working with the Bureau to expose Glenn's organization. The accident was staged after we learned Glenn had ordered her death." "Where is she?" "Boise, Idaho, living under the name Rebecca Franklin. The supernatural contacts you've been experiencing were your mother using Glenn's own surveillance equipment to communicate with you." I stared at Agent Collins as the room spun around me. Glenn was monitoring my house. Has been for years, but your mother learned how to hack into his system and use it to her advantage. She's been watching over you, making sure you were safe." Glenn laughed a sound like glass breaking. "Even in witness protection, Sarah couldn't stop being your mother. She risked her cover to guide you to the truth." Agent Collins escorted Glenn toward the door, but he stopped and looked back at me one final time. "Ferdinand, I know you hate me now, and you have every right to. But everything I did, even the terrible things I did, because I love you. You're my son, and that will never change." "Tom Wilson was my father," I said quietly. "You were just the sperm donor." Glenn nodded sadly as the agents led him away. "Maybe you're right. Maybe love isn't enough to make up for murder." After they left Agent Collins and I stood alone in Glenn's office, surrounded by the wreckage of 24 years' worth of lies. "Can I see her?" I asked. "Can I see my mother?" Collins smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her. "Ferdinand, she's been waiting 5 years for this moment. We can have you on a plane to Boise this afternoon." I looked out Glenn's windows at the city he'd built with blood money, at the empire that was about to crumble, at the life I'd lived without knowing it was constructed on a foundation of lies and murder. And I realized that sometimes the dead coming back to life is the most miraculous thing that can happen to a family, even if it takes 5 years and an FBI investigation to make it possible. The flight to Boise felt longer than the 5 years I'd believed my mother was dead. Agent Collins sat beside me explaining the details of the witness protection program and what to expect when I saw Mom again. But I could barely concentrate on her words because my mind kept cycling through the same impossible thought: my mother is alive. Boise in October looked like every other medium-sized American city, all strip malls and suburban developments spreading across high desert landscape. Agent Collins drove us to a modest ranch house in a neighborhood where children's bicycles lay scattered across front yards, and the biggest excitement was probably the occasional garage sale. She knocked on the front door with a pattern I recognized: 3 taps, pause, 3 more taps. Mom's signal from my childhood. The door opened and there she was. 5 years older, her brown hair now streaked with silver, wearing jeans and a sweater I'd never seen before. But her eyes were exactly the same, warm and loving and filled with tears as she looked at me standing on her doorstep. "Fairy," she whispered, and suddenly I was 8 years old again, running into her arms after a nightmare. "Mom?" I couldn't manage anything else. 5 years of grief and anger and loneliness poured out of me as I held her, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the reality of her heartbeat against my chest. Agent Collins excused herself to make phone calls while Mom and I sat in her living room, catching up on half a decade of separation. She told me about the night she faked her death, about learning to live under a new identity, about watching my life from a distance through Glenn's surveillance equipment. "I know about the divorce," she said softly. "I wanted so badly to be there for you when Jessica left. Why didn't you contact me sooner? Why let me think you were dead?" "Because Glenn had put a price on my head and anyone close to me was in danger. The only way to keep you safe was to disappear completely." She showed me photo albums filled with pictures she'd somehow obtained of my life over the past 5 years. My college graduation, where she'd been in the crowd, wearing sunglasses and a different hairstyle. My wedding to Jessica, where she'd watched from a car across the street. Jessica's birthday party last year, captured through a telephoto lens. "You were at Jessica's birthday party. I was everywhere that mattered, Fairy. I never stopped being your mother." As evening approached, Agent Collins returned with news that made my stomach drop. "Glenn Morrison escaped federal custody during transport an hour ago. His associates ambushed the prison van outside Salem. 2 agents are in the hospital." Mom's face went white. "He'll come here. Glenn knows the FBI brought Ferdinand to me." "We're moving you both to a safe house immediately," Collins said. "Pack only essentials." But before we could gather anything, the sound of vehicles in the driveway made us all freeze. Collins drew her service weapon and peered through the front window. 3 black SUVs, armed men, were too late. My phone rang with an unknown number. Collins nodded for me to answer. Ferdinand. Glenn's voice was calm despite his circumstances. I know you're in there with Sarah. Come outside and let's finish this conversation. Glenn, you're making everything worse for yourself. No, son, I'm making it simple. 24 years ago, I made a choice that destroyed one family to protect another. Tonight, I'm going to make things right. Through the window, I could see Glenn standing beside a black Mercedes flanked by two men with assault rifles. He looked exactly like the successful businessman I'd known my entire life, except for the desperate edge in his posture. What do you want? I want to see my son one more time. I want to explain why everything I did was necessary. Collins shook her head violently, but I was already walking toward the door. Ferdinand, don't go out there. He'll kill you both if I don't. Mom grabbed my arm. Ferry, you don't owe him anything. I don't owe him anything, I agreed. But I owe Dad everything. And Dad would want me to protect you. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Glenn smiled when he saw me, the same proud expression he'd worn at my high school graduation. There's my boy. You look good, Ferdinand. Stronger than when I last saw you. Let them go, Glenn. This is between us. No, son, this is about family. Your mother and I created you together, and we're going to end this together. Behind Glenn, I could see FBI vehicles approaching in the distance, their lights flashing, but sirens silent. Collins must have called for backup before Glenn arrived. You have maybe 10 minutes before federal agents surround this place, I said. Then we better make them count. Glenn pulled out a pistol, but kept it pointed at the ground. Ferdinand, I need you to understand something. I killed Tom Wilson because he was going to destroy the life I wanted to build for my son. I faked Sarah's death because she was going to destroy the life I'd already built for you. You destroyed my life when you murdered my father. Tom Wilson wasn't your father. Glenn's calm facade cracked, revealing the desperation underneath. I am your father. My blood, my DNA, my legacy. Everything I built was for you. Everything you built was for yourself. Glenn raised the pistol, and for a moment I thought he was going to shoot me. Instead, he pointed it toward the house where Mom and Collins were waiting. Ferdinand, you have a choice. Come with me now tonight, and I'll disappear forever. Your mother can go back to her real life, Agent Collins can close her case, and you can inherit my legitimate businesses. Everyone wins. Except for Dad, who's been dead for 24 years. Tom Wilson was a weak man who would have destroyed everything out of misplaced moral superiority. I saved you from his limitations. The FBI vehicles were getting closer. Glenn's associates were getting nervous, their weapons now trained on the house behind me. Last chance, Ferdinand. Come with your biological father, or watch me burn down everything you've ever cared about. I looked at Glenn Morrison, the man who'd shaped my entire life through murder and manipulation, who'd killed my real father and controlled my family for decades, who was now threatening to kill my mother unless I submitted to his twisted version of love. And I realized that some choices aren't really choices at all. I'm not your son, I said quietly. I'm Tom Wilson's son. And Tom Wilson raised me to stand up to bullies. Glenn's expression shifted to something like heartbreak. Ferdinand, you're making a terrible mistake. No, Glenn, you made the terrible mistake 24 years ago. I'm just finally cleaning it up. He raised the pistol again, but before he could decide who to point it at, sniper fire from the approaching FBI vehicles took out both of his associates. Glenn spun around as federal agents swarmed the driveway, their red laser sights dancing across his chest. Glenn Morrison, drop your weapon, Agent Collins shouted from behind me. Glenn looked at the agents, then at me. Then at the house where my mother waited. For a moment, I thought he was going to surrender. Instead, he smiled sadly and raised the pistol toward his own head. I love you, son. I hope someday you'll understand that everything I did was for you. Glenn, don't. but it was too late. The man who'd killed my father, manipulated my family, and controlled my life for 24 years chose his own ending rather than face the consequences of his actions. As federal agents secured the scene and paramedics confirmed what we all knew, I stood in a stranger's driveway in Boise, Idaho, finally free from the shadow that had shaped my entire existence. Mom appeared beside me, taking my hand as we watched them cover Glenn Morrison's body. "Are you all right?" she asked. I looked at my mother, alive and real and safe. Then at the chaos Glenn's choices had created, then at the federal agents who were finally closing a case that had destroyed too many lives. "I think I will be," I said. "For the first time in 24 years, I think I'm going to be all right." 6 months later, I stood in Riverside Cemetery on a sunny April morning, placing fresh flowers on 2 graves. The first was a simple headstone reading, "Tom Wilson, beloved father." The second, newer grave was marked Glenn Morrison, with no additional inscription. I'd paid for his burial because despite everything, nobody deserves to be forgotten completely. Glenn Morrison had received 3 consecutive life sentences posthumously for the murders of my father and 2 other men whose bodies were discovered when the FBI excavated the Riverside Apartments foundation. His criminal empire collapsed within weeks of his death, leading to dozens of additional arrests and convictions. The city of Portland recovered $43 million in stolen funds that were redirected to community development programs. Mom had returned to Portland in December, moving into a small house just 6 blocks from mine. We spent Christmas together for the first time in 5 years, creating new traditions while honoring the memory of Tom Wilson. She'd resumed her maiden name, Sarah Mitchell, and started volunteering with families of missing persons. "The work helps me process what we've been through," she'd told me. "And maybe I can help other families find the closure we've finally found." I'd left my job at the insurance company and started Wilson Mitchell Investigations with Mom as my partner. Our firm specialized in cold cases and helping families navigate the complex emotions that come with discovering difficult truths about their loved ones. Jake Sullivan joined us as a senior investigator, bringing decades of experience and a network of contacts throughout the Pacific Northwest. Our first major case involved helping a woman in Salem discover what had really happened to her brother, who disappeared 15 years earlier. Using techniques Mom and Jake had developed during their investigation of Glenn Morrison, we traced the missing man to a construction site where his remains were eventually recovered. The resolution brought his family peace, and us the satisfaction of knowing our work honored Dad's memory. Marcus became our office manager, leaving his security guard job to help us build something meaningful from the wreckage of our family's tragedy. "You've got a gift for finding the truth," he'd told me. "Tom Wilson would be proud of what you're doing with it." On Valentine's Day, I'd met Jennifer at a coffee shop near Powell Books. She was a trauma therapist who specialized in helping families reunite after long separations. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours and covered everything from family dynamics to the ethics of witness protection programs. She understood the complexity of loving someone while grieving the life you'd thought you were living. Healing isn't about forgetting the past, Jennifer had explained during one of our early dates. It's about integrating difficult experiences into a coherent narrative that allows you to move forward. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honesty and mutual respect rather than the surface compatibility that had characterized my marriage to Jessica. Jennifer helped me understand that Glenn Morrison's manipulations hadn't defined my character, that I could choose who to become regardless of my genetic inheritance. Diana and I had rebuilt our relationship through family therapy sessions that helped us process the revelation that our entire childhood had been constructed around a lie. She'd returned the anonymous payments she'd received from Glenn's company, donating the money to victims' rights organizations. "I keep thinking about all the times I defended Glenn Morrison," she'd said during one particularly difficult session. "He was at every family gathering, every important moment, and I never suspected what he was capable of." "None of us did," I'd replied. "That was his greatest weapon." Mrs. Patterson revealed herself to be retired FBI agent Dorothy Patterson, who'd been assigned to watch our family after Mom entered witness protection. She'd genuinely grown to care about me during her years of surveillance, making our friendship real despite its artificial beginning. "Your mother never stopped worrying about you," she'd told me. Every phone call we had included questions about your health, your work, your happiness. Love like that doesn't disappear just because someone has to hide. In March, I testified before a congressional committee investigating weaknesses in the Witness Protection Program. My family story had become part of a broader conversation about how to better support families separated by federal investigations. The current system protects witnesses. I told the committee, but it doesn't adequately consider the psychological impact on family members who are left behind without explanation. Children deserve age-appropriate honesty about why a parent has disappeared. The legislation that resulted from our testimony would help future families avoid the isolation and confusion that had characterized my experience. Standing in the cemetery that April morning, I thought about the supernatural mystery that had started this journey. The voice I'd heard calling my name. The figure I'd seen through the peephole. The impossible phone calls in the middle of the night. Agent Collins had explained the technology that made it possible, but the emotional truth remained mysterious. "Love finds a way," Mom had said when I'd asked her about it. "I couldn't physically be there for you, but I needed you to know you weren't alone." Maybe that need was strong enough to transcend the limitations of witness protection. I'd learned that some questions don't need scientific answers, that the miracle of family bonds surviving separation and deception was more important than understanding the mechanics of how Mom had managed to contact me. Jennifer arrived at the cemetery as I was finishing my visit with Tom and Glenn. She brought coffee and the Sunday crossword puzzle, which had become our weekly tradition. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling beside me on the bench near Dad's grave. "Grateful," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. 5 years ago, I thought I was alone in the world, except for Diana and a few friends. Now I have Mom back, a business that means something, a relationship built on truth instead of convenience. And Glenn Morrison. I looked at his simple grave marker, thinking about the man who'd shaped my life through violence and manipulation, who'd loved me in his own twisted way, who'd chosen death rather than face the consequences of his choices. "I pity him," I said finally. "He had everything: success, wealth, influence. But he was so afraid of losing control that he destroyed the very relationships he claimed to value. In the end, his love was really just another form of possession." Jennifer took my hand as we walked back toward our cars. "Your story is remarkable, Ferdinand. You've taken a family tragedy and turned it into a mission to help others. Tom Wilson would be proud of the man you've become." "I hope so. I try to make choices he would have respected." That evening, Mom came over for dinner as she did every Sunday. We cooked together, sharing stories about our week while preparing the kind of simple meal that creates intimacy through shared domestic ritual. I got a call from a family in Eugene. She said, stirring pasta sauce that smelled like herbs and hope. Their teenage son disappeared 3 months ago. The police think he ran away, but the parents believe something else happened. "What do you think?" "I think we should drive down there next week and find out. Every family deserves the truth, even if it's painful." As we ate dinner, Mom told me about her therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez, the same counselor who'd helped her process Dad's death years earlier. She was working through the complex emotions that came with surviving when others hadn't, with watching my life from a distance while being unable to offer comfort. "Some days I feel guilty for being alive when Tom isn't," she admitted. "But then I remember that Glenn Morrison wanted me dead, and my survival is a form of justice." "Your survival gave our family a second chance," I said. "Dad would want you to live fully, not spend your life feeling guilty for escaping Glenn's violence." After dinner, we looked through photo albums Mom had assembled during her time in witness protection, pictures of me she'd obtained from various sources, tracking my growth from a confused young man into someone who could handle the truth about his family. You were always stronger than you knew, she said, pointing to a graduation photo where I looked uncertain despite my achievements. Even when Glenn's manipulations were at their worst, you maintained your integrity. I had good teachers. I replied, thinking of the values Tom Wilson had instilled in me during the 8 years I'd known him, the foundation that had survived decades of deception. As Mom prepared to leave, she hugged me with the intensity of someone who'd thought she'd lost the chance for physical affection with her son. I love you, Fairy. Not just because you're my child, but because of the man you've chosen to become. I love you too, Mom. Welcome home. After she left, I called Jennifer to say goodnight, then settled in my living room with a book about family trauma and resilience. The house felt peaceful in a way it never had during the years when Glenn Morrison's surveillance equipment had made it a stage for his voyeurism. My phone buzzed with a text message from Diana. Saw the news about the Oregon legislation passing. Dad would be proud of what you're accomplishing. I smiled, thinking about how our family had transformed tragedy into purpose, isolation, into connection lies, into truth. Outside Portland, spring rain began falling, the same kind of gentle precipitation that had characterized the night Mom supposedly died 5 years ago. But now I understood that some endings are actually beginnings, that some deaths are rebirths, that love can survive even the most sophisticated attempts to destroy it. Glenn Morrison had tried to control our family through murder and manipulation, but his attempts to possess us had ultimately liberated us from his influence. Tom Wilson's love had survived 24 years of lies, proving stronger than violence or deception. I thought about the supernatural phone calls that had started this journey, about the voice that had guided me toward truth when lies seemed more comfortable. Sometimes the dead speak through the living. Sometimes love transcends the boundaries between presence and absence. Sometimes justice comes disguised as mystery, requiring faith as much as evidence. Tomorrow I would drive to Eugene with Mom to help another family search for answers about their missing son. Next week, I would testify in a civil trial against Glenn Morrison's estate. Next month, Jennifer and I would celebrate our first anniversary by visiting the coffee shop where we'd met. But tonight, I sat in my peaceful house, grateful for the journey that had led me from supernatural terror to human healing, from family destruction to family restoration, from lies built on murder to truth built on love. The phone didn't ring at 4 a.m. anymore, but if it did, I would answer without fear. I had learned that the voices calling us toward difficult truths are often the voices of people who love us enough to risk everything for our healing. Some mysteries are worth solving. Some hauntings lead to justice. Some families are strong enough to survive anything, even death itself. I had found my way home to the people who mattered most, and that was the only supernatural miracle I needed. Have you ever experienced something that seemed impossible, but led you to discover an important truth about your family or your past? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear about the power of family bonds surviving even the most difficult circumstances. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding hope in the darkest situations and discovering that love really can conquer fear. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and justice. May you find the courage to seek truth in your own life no matter how buried it might be.